Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. Ukraine's long-range strike campaign against Russia appears to be intensifying, with a reported hit on the Primorsk oil terminal in the Baltic Sea, possibly involving mid-range missiles. Now, the attack shows Kyiv's ability to reach deep into Russian territory, even as fighting along the front line continues. It all comes as Ukrainian and U.S. delegations wrapped up 2 days of talks in Florida on the weekend, with Steve Witkoff stating that the talks were constructive, even as there were no breakthroughs. Now, to discuss it all further, we're joined by Rostyslav Khotin, senior editor, RFE RL's Ukrainian service. Good to have you back on TVP World. Welcome.
Hello, Sasha.
I want to know about the significance of this strike. I mean, the Ukrainians have struck into Russia before. What makes this target different? How significant is this even for Russia, and what does it tell us about Ukraine's abilities?
First of all, Ukraine, it's not for the first time that Ukraine made a strike against targets on the Russian Baltic Sea coast. That's first thing. The second thing is that in Primorsk, this oil terminal in Primorsk, which works for export of Russian oil abroad, is the biggest oil terminal on the Russian Baltic Sea coast. That's first significance. The strike was so powerful that the fire was like whole night and whole day till the yet another night. It's like it wasn't possible to extinguish it quickly. So the fire was very powerful and seen from far away. Recently, also Ukraine made a strike against Ust-Luga terminal, another terminal, lesser terminal on the Baltic Sea coast. So Ukraine is now targeting targets which are quite far away from Ukrainian soil, using mostly drones, attacking drones. Ukraine produced drones, and it will have implications for Russian oil exports, especially now when there is this kind of waiver, 1 month waiver for Russian oil exports on the tanker oil imposed by the United States administration. So Russia won't be able to earn as much as it wanted to earn. At the same time, on the same day, Ukraine also struck oil refinery in the Russian Bashkortostan region near Volga area, deep into Russia, to the east. So at the same time, there were two strikes, one against Ust-Luga, against Primorsk on the Baltic Sea coast, and another one in Bashkortostan. So at the same time, Ukraine struck two energy infrastructure objects on the Russian territory with very powerful strikes.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, we're seeing the pictures there now, these powerful strikes, as you call them. We said not the first time, but how does this, if anything, change, let's say, the leverage that Kyiv has? I mean, we know that the talks have essentially not had any breakthroughs, but also when Russians hear of this, when they see this, does that give, let's say, any stronger sense of that Ukraine can do more? Will the Russians take this in strategically, or how do you think Russia will take all this?
It means that the Russian population, the population of Russian Federation should acknowledge, should understand that war, it's not somewhere in remote Ukraine, far away country. You know, the war came to their own homes. You know, people in Russia are spreading widely footage of filmed on mobile phones of this aftermath of these strikes, especially on the Baltic Sea coast. So people in Russia will understand that the war is here. And another thing I want to mention is that it's a powerful strike against Russian oil and oil exporting industries and oil refining industry in Russia. So yet another object of this Russian energy industry was hit. Two objects were hit by Ukrainian strikes. And sadly, again, Russia won't be able to earn as much as it hoped for with U.S. waiver for the Russian tanker oil, being now freely exported. Russia, since this step was introduced by U.S. administration, Russia was earning roughly $1.05 million dollars a day with these additional revenues, which were not foreseen for Russian state budget, which sponsors the war machine of Russian Federation against Ukraine. So Russia won't be able to earn as much as it hoped for.
And also, you mentioned this earlier, so I'm curious, we talked about drones. I mean, this has become very much a drone war on both sides. Ukraine has also gotten a lot of experience with this. Now, recently, we know the Ukrainians have sent some of their experts to the Middle East to try and counter much of what they know from these Shahed drones, those Iranian-made Shahed drones. Tell us a little bit about what kind of lessons Ukraine has learned first off, and how do you think they're making an impact there in the Middle East against those drones from Iran?
First of all, the Ukrainians learned the principle that the less is more. If you intercept Shahed drones, which cost roughly $20,000, with cheap option, with the intercepting drone, anti-drone weapons, it means efficiency. It means saving money, saving costs. Because at the beginning of this war against Iran, the American troops and also the Gulf states, they were intercepting Shahed drones launched from Iran with Patriot missiles, which cost like millions of dollars. You know, it wasn't cost-effective step at all. So Ukrainians are teaching them, you know, like cost-effectiveness. You know, you should use cheap options to intercept Shaheds, not costly and powerful missiles. Sometimes against one drone, there were several Patriot missiles launched in the Gulf. So now roughly between 200 and 250 Ukrainian servicemen, Ukrainian experts are deployed to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, but also to Jordan, to protect both American military bases, but mostly civilian energy infrastructure, airports of the Gulf states, which are also, Ukraine considers them to be strategic partners and want to help them. So Ukrainian experts are there with intercepting drones. Some of them are very cheap, like they cost several $1,000s. It's not big deal. Like drone Octopus or Sting, they prove themselves very well on Ukrainian battlefields intercepting Shaheds. Sometimes Russia launches 200, 150 Shaheds per day, per night, which were supplied initially by Iran, but then the production of Shaheds was localized in Tatarstan, Republic of Russian Federation, in Yelabuga, the town of Yelabuga. So now Russia produces its own Shaheds. They are called Gerань drones. So Ukraine has this experience, and it wanted to share with its strategic partners in the Middle East, in the Gulf region. But also, to be honest, Ukraine hopes that these countries will help to convince Russia to stop war against Ukraine, because these countries like the Arab Emirates or Qatar, they have good relations with Russia as well. And Ukraine also hopes that these countries, which are rich countries, of course, because of oil and gas revenues, that they will take part in the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine, the building of Ukraine after the war.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that as well, in terms of what this means for Ukraine strategically. As you said already, those countries might be on the side of Ukraine that might be leveraged for bigger, let's say, strategic shifts down the line. Does this, Ukraine being involved here, do you see this as a kind of, let's say, the know-how, the expertise that Kyiv will be more recognized and supported across the region?
Yeah, it's a geopolitical investment, if you want. It's a kind of Ukraine wants to be acknowledged, the drone superpower, the country which has the biggest experience of intercepting, of dealing with Shaheds for more than 4 years, slightly less, because Russia started using Shaheds against Ukraine in the autumn 2022, 6 months into the war, full-fledged scale invasion of Ukraine. Secondly, Ukraine has this cheap options, cost-effective options to intercept drones. Ukraine wanted to share this experience, and experience is very significant. During these 4 years of war, Russia launched around up to 60,000 Shaheds against Ukraine, targeting mostly civilian population, apartment blocks, energy infrastructure, especially during winter, harsh winter period. Ukraine has this experience, and it wanted to be acknowledged and wanted to be taken as a serious partner, which want to share its experience. And Ukraine wanted to provide this know-how to Gulf states. And Ukraine also, as I said, wants these countries to help to mediate somehow. But the United Arab Emirates, for instance, were involved, and Qatar were involved in prisoners exchange between Ukraine and Russia. They were mediators, so Ukraine is very grateful to these countries for helping to secure release of Ukrainian prisoners of war from
all the experience. Sorry to jump in, Rosa. I want to get really quickly one fast one, because also in terms of drones cooperation, you called Ukraine a superpower in terms of drones. The Netherlands, for one, is also now integrating that more into its forces, anti-drone capabilities. Do you think other countries now in Europe will follow? How is that cooperation going to go on militarily with drone tech in Europe? Give us just really quickly a sentence on that.
Yeah, Ukraine wants to launch co-production of drones with different European countries. For instance, with the Netherlands, with Germany already, with Czech Republic, and with Spain and some others. So Ukraine wants to have the also ability for artificial intelligence to be introduced into the drone industry. And Ukraine wants joint co-production with powerful European countries, high-tech countries of drones as well.
Mm-hmm. And last one, I want to ask you, Rostyslav, about these peace talks between the U.S. and Ukrainians on the weekend, this past weekend in Florida. Witkoff said there was constructive progress made. What's your assessment? Are we moving anywhere with this?
The talks were held as a constructive step in the right direction, but the only positive outcome probably is that there might be new prisoners exchange between Ukraine and Russia, again mediated by Americans. So we don't know the date, we don't know the numbers of how many prisoners could be exchanged, but the feeling is that there might be a new wave of exchange of prisoners of war between Ukraine and Russia.
All right. So, as always, we'll be keeping our eye on that, how all this develops. Look, thanks so much again for all that expertise this morning. Rostyslav Khotin there from RFE RL's Ukrainian server. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.